Hi, Jonathan. Thank you so much for being on Social Impact Power Chats. We so appreciate having you. And as we are wont to do, we're just going to jump right in. So would love for you to tell us how you got into social impact as you frame it.
Yeah, thanks for having me. So, uh, you know, I, I was thinking about this question even before the call, and it's weird. I don't really like consider what I do social impact, even though it clearly is. And that's because I focus so specifically on like one part of, what many people call like ESG. I focus on the E very much so, though it has interesting ramifications in the other letters there. So yeah, I got into, I guess, what I would call social impact in this context, mostly through well, by accident, and partially because of who I am. So I realized very early in my career I'm quite the bleeding heart. I was in a lot of tech jobs in Silicon Valley and San Francisco, and I was leaving those jobs mostly on like moral or ethical grounds. Um, and I realized after some amount of that that this is not a sustainable thing for me.
No
Like I
pun
need to figure
intended.
out, yeah, I need to figure out like what's driving me and do a little bit of introspection. And I did what a lot of I think frustrated people do in that scenario. I joined a nonprofit, um, which ended up being in many ways the right thing to do at that point in my life. It showed me the potential for I use the word impact a lot in my career, but I think at that point I saw what real impact looks like when you impact the lives of other people in a way that is physical and in the real world and meaningful for their lives. And so that nonprofit, it is called Sweet Farm. It's bills itself as the first climate sanctuary in the United States. It's by and large focused on our food systems, waste systems, agricultural, so on and so forth. And the goal of the organization is to educate people about where your food comes from, how do our municipal systems work, and in particular, where are the opportunities for us to do better as a society and as people. And as a result, the organization is really focused on not just education and inspiring stories of people doing really interesting things, but also it's focused on innovation. It has a pretty large research arm. We work closely with large academic institutions. Right now, we're on the East Coast, so we have a 50-acre complex, and we do a lot of farming and sort of exhibits and things like that. And we work a lot with researchers and founders. So anyhow, that's how I kind of got into it. And then from there, it was really about what can I do in this space, which was not the space that I had come from, right? So from there, it was really like getting educated, getting involved with founders, and then ultimately landing where I am now, which is on more of the finance side of things. Like, how can I get more people out here doing this really, what I see as interesting work and compelling work within sustainability and climate? So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
100%. So sitting in your current role, at SNOCAP, thinking about investment, thinking about deal flow for good, as we'll call it.
Yeah.
Would love to just hear like, a bit more about your role so that we can then talk about kind of a granular example of how you get that work done.
Sure. So, for people who follow along or listen to your stories, they've probably heard from a lot of founders or from people starting businesses. Starting a financial firm is no different. I'm still a founder. I still deal with founder-like things where I'm doing many things. So I don't have a prescriptive like this is what I do all the time because it does change. It is a bit fluid, especially as we evolve. But my role within SNOCAP, which is our fund and our firm, is first and foremost, I am the basic administrator for our fund. Like I do all the what's called the middle office work, and so that's going to be things like making sure our legal documents are prepared for new employees we bring on, or making sure that our term sheets and our other various sort of minutia within the day-to-day operations of the fund are solid and on time and on track. And in that sense, I'm kind of almost like a heartbeat fund. So that's probably the only fair description of what I do within our fund. But that said, there's two other partners I work with. They're some of the most impressive people I've ever met in my life, and they equally contribute to the fund in different ways. Some more on deal flow, like bringing in new and interesting opportunities. Others more on diligence, kind of researching those opportunities and figuring out, does it make sense for us? Can we provide value to them? So on and so forth. And so, yeah, I guess like the basic answer is I keep the ship moving, but what that means day to day can change, and I think that's probably the only fair answer I can give.
So the goal here is there's somebody listening who's in a role, in a position where they need to think about something in a smart way. Your expertise in impact investment, just to bring it back to Sweet Farm, you understand what additive work is. Like one of my favorite conversations with you, we were talking about, the green leaf that's on some of these fund collaterals. And it's like, it's to say that something can be climate benefit, but not climate additive, right? Like this isn't a new business that's coming into the landscape that actually is helping to solve a problem. And I think one of the things that you do is look for businesses to invest in that are solving problems, that are moving the needle. And that probably comes from your Sweet Farm background. Like you know that needles need to be moved and that requires market value, right? And market access. So I'm wondering if you could, kind of walk us through like how you think about that. Like how do you think about, like diligencing the heartbeat or the soul of an organization to really like ask the question, like, is this worthy of SNOCAP's look, right? Like how do you think through all the pitch decks that come across your desk like that?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a sort of cultural answer, and then there's a more sort of analytical answer. The cultural answer comes from, the background with the nonprofit. When you choose to build a nonprofit in the food space or the agricultural space, it is a sanctuary too. It's a sanctuary for farm animals. You will almost certainly intersect many other cultures within that space. And some of those cultures, I think, are arms wide open. Like we'll take everyone and try to show them, a better way forward. I think others may be more closed, maybe using a shame tactic or a guilt tactic to try to change your behavior. And I'm not a social psychologist. I don't know what method is better, but I know which one I like more. And I like the idea that you meet people where they are and you try to sort of incrementally move them in a better direction. And so in that spirit, when we think about our fund and what we invest in, we try to avoid behavior change. We recognize that there's a lot of things we do in this world that are not good for the environment and that are pollutive and in some cases are expensive. And so what we settled on, at least at the fund level, is can we find the things that they're maybe not the things we interact with directly, but they may be upstream of us. And can we change some of those things so that they're cheaper, which basic rational actors, if it's cheaper, you'll probably do it. It's not going to require a behavior change. And then can we make them better for the environment in some way, in some meaningful way? And if it's high enough up in some value chain or some supply chain that we're making that change, it will ripple down and have a massive impact. And so the way we think about problem solving, both at the nonprofit, but now increasingly at the fund, is can we solve problems really, really high up in supply chains that to us, regular old consumers every day just trying to live our lives and survive, can we still make better decisions as a result, even though we didn't know we were making a better decision? And so that, in a sense, was our sort of aha moment for the fund and how we structured the sorts of companies we want to look at. And then from there, we built more aggressive criteria, specifically around outcomes. So we look at things like carbon impact within supply chains. We look at the ability for that company to grow, implying that it can serve multiple sectors, multiple markets. And then we also look at macro impact, right? We don't want to support a solution that only, maybe benefits a very small population of people. We want global solutions that can impact someone living on an island under a poverty line versus someone living in the Hamptons, right? Like, we want all those things to be true. And I think that's like a really, really critical thing that can be overlooked in conversations. Not all positive change is equally positive. And I think we have an obligation to think about the externalities of the things we invest in and push forward.
Brilliant. Well, I think that advice could be applied to so many problems that people are working on, but I really appreciate just like the human truth that change is really hard, and meeting people at a place where they can be part of the solution without actually needing to do much is pretty brilliant, John. So I appreciate everything that you all are doing. And, as you and I also have talked about, there's so much working capital opportunity in foundations that I think are ripe for impact investment. So if anyone's listening and, thinking about how to be additive, and I'll just pitch you, they should call you and think about how they could be partnering with SNOCAP. I think the world will be a better place if your fund and your philosophy scaled. So
yeah, thanks for saying that. That's really kind.
Oh, well, it's the truth. Okay. Power chat. We're keeping this short. This is our final question. Crystal ball. Looking into the future, what are trends that you're looking at, or places that you think there's really going to be growth that people who are in this ecosystem should be thinking about too?
Totally. So, I don't know if I told you this before, but I'm somewhat obsessed with this question because I get asked it a lot.
Okay.
And I have this like fundamental disagreement with the premise of the question.
Okay, bring it.
You have to remember. I mean, it's not the case these days because so much of venture and risk finance is focused on things that I don't think are actually risky, and I don't think are actually like interesting, frankly. And I think the reason for that is because we found a playbook. We found a playbook within venture and investing that like you find a company that has XYZ criteria, they sell in these ways, they're typically software, and they will grow in this way, and you'll get lots of money and all your investors will be happy. The problem with that is it's actually woefully uncreative. Like, there's nothing new coming out of that. No matter how much money goes into the marketing budgets of those companies to convince you otherwise, believe me, as someone who's been building those companies for 2 decades, it is rare to see true innovation. And I personally feel like asking what is exciting right now is kind of like asking like what is not creative, or like what is basically already being funded, right? And that's not to say there aren't interesting innovations being funded right now. It's just like they're a very small portion of what's receiving dollars these days from venture and from big.
Okay, so what's the question I should be asked? What's the question you want to answer?
I think the question that I wish more people would ask is like, how can I go do the things that make me feel better about my work? And like, how can I make my work and my like passion the same thing? And that's not for everyone, by the way. I want people to stay in jobs where they can have their work-life separation. Like, this is not necessarily a question for everyone. It was an important question for me. It's why I left, an unleavable industry to go do this. I want people to ask that question because I think there is, for probably one of the first times in my life, just this incredible bridge of an opportunity to move from what have been traditionally well-funded industries and sectors into sectors that are chronically underfunded, but are increasingly receiving new funding and new innovation and new opportunities. Like, you can be at the Uber of climate tech or the Google of sustainability tech. Like, that is a unique opportunity right now in our time that I just like it. Even the previous clean tech quote unquote boom didn't have these sorts of opportunities outside of like, say, solar. And so what I love talking to people about, and I am, putting my money where my mouth is, but also my time, like I'm doing podcasts and things like that to try to talk to people and get to people who want to see how to break into these spaces. I think there's just such incredible opportunity. So yeah, the question I hope people start asking is not like, instead of what are the opportunities, it's like, how can I get into those opportunities? Like, how can I get involved today? Because what those opportunities are going to be dependent on you and what you want to do. I don't think that climate tech, for instance, is a term we're going to be saying in 10 years. Just like you don't call your phone a smartphone anymore, right? It's just a phone, because the other phone is probably what you would qualify at this point. And similarly, I think all technology will become somewhat climate conscious, basically making the term climate tech irrelevant, because if climate conscientiousness is a factor of everything we do, then everything becomes climate tech. And if that's the case, the question about like what I should be working on is not the right question. The question is, what's exciting to you, and how can you bring those two inevitabilities together closer now, right? And that's what I want to help you figure out. That's what I want to like empower you to think, because without people thinking that way, we're not going to have enough innovation to address what I see as like the biggest opportunity and challenge in front of this generation of people. So that's the question I want people to ask. Hopefully that's not too spicy of a take.
No, I love it. It's a perfect take. And ultimately, I think it speaks to your and my belief in humanity and people's ability to really be additive in this moment, which is really all we have, right? We have our time and our ability to do that. So thank you for reminding all of us that we can be part of making it all be okay. And it's always a pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you for taking the time today and for all that you do. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. This was great. It was good to see you as well.